Hello and welcome to what will be a short drawing tutorial on how I go about enlarging and copying an image from a book or from some other reference. Now the image that I've chosen to copy for the purpose of this tutorial comes from the Charles Bargue drawing course. Charles Bargue was an artist from the 19th century, and one of the things that he required all of his students to do was to copy as accurate as possible these 70 drawings that he did himself. So in the book are the 70 drawings. So you can see here such things as heads, torsos, and various other sort of body parts, normally taken from plaster casts of famous sculptures and things like that. But for this tutorial I'm going to be using this image here, which is of a forearm. So what I basically want to do here is just draw this forearm as accurately as possible as depicted in the image, but I also want to enlarge it. Now for that I'm going to need this, which is a proportional divider. Now it's basically like a divider but with two ends, and you also notice these holes here. They're basically for adjusting the scale at which you want to enlarge the drawing you want to copy. So you see here I'm just taking out the little clasp that holds the two pieces together and putting it in a different hole. When I now use it, it will enlarge at a greater factor, as it were. What I thought I'd also show you here are just some regular metal dividers. Now I'm not actually going to be using these in the tutorial, but I thought I'd show you them because they're very useful if you just want to copy an image or another drawing one-to-one. And as you can see, you can very finely adjust them using those screws on the side. There's also a smaller one for smaller drawings. Also what we're going to be needing here is a set square. This is very important. And for the pencil, I'm going to be using a hard pencil, a 2H, because I want the initial line drawing to be quite faint. And last but not least, the paper, which we're going to be drawing on. So now the tools have been introduced, it's time to start drawing. So what I want to do is enlarge this image here by a factor of 1.5. So that means I'm going to have to adjust the proportional divider. So I'm just going to take out the little clip holding two parts together, and I want to put it in the hole that is marked 1.5. So hold on, let me just check that that's right. No, I don't think it is. Hold on, let me just readjust that. Okay, so basically how this proportional divider works is that with the slightly shorter end of the divider, I measure out, here in this case, the length of the forearm, and the other end of the divider then enlarges the measurement I've just taken by a factor of, in this case, 1.5. So I'm just marking down the length of the forearm, the newly enlarged forearm, also using the set square as well, just to make sure that the line is all square. And then again, using the smaller end of the proportional divider, I'm measuring the height of the forearm. So I will then again just make sure that it's fully fitting. I will then take the other end of the divider and use it to mark the width, the height of the forearm. So using the wrong end there, so there we go. So just I then mark that down again using the set square on the edge of the paper, just to make sure that everything's all at 90 degrees. Okay, so now I know the length and height of the enlarged drawing. I'm just going to use those 4 points that I've marked out to draw a bounding box. Now this is basically going to just delineate the top, bottom and the left hand side and the right hand side of the drawing. And this is going to be very useful later on when I'm doing the finer details, because there'll be points from which I can measure from. So now that the bounding box has been finished, I can now draw the guidelines. And if you can see here in this more simplified version of the forearm, there are 3 guidelines. So basically, to find those guidelines, I'm going to take my proportional divider and measure from each end of the drawing to where the guideline is, and then mark it down using the other end on the enlarged drawing. Now these guidelines, like the bounding box, are going to act like anchor points, from which, using the proportional divider, I'll more easily be able to figure out the exact positioning of the lines and smaller details of the drawing. Okay, so now that I've made the bounding box and the guidelines, I want to use these in conjunction with the proportional divider in order to locate and mark out the key points of the simplified drawing. And then once I have found these key points, I just need to join them up in order to create the simplified drawing. So you can see here I'm placing one point of the small end of the proportional divider on the guiding line of the original drawing, and then I'm just moving the other point up to where the forearm line is. And then I take the other end of the proportional divider, place one point on the guiding line, and then with the other point I can mark out where the line of the forearm is on the enlarged drawing. So to then mark out the next point, I measure on the original drawing from the horizontal guideline, and I then mark out with a sort of little rough line where that is on the enlarged drawing. And then I again measure from the vertical guideline on the original drawing, and then mark out again with a little rough line where that is, and where the 2 rough lines meet, that is where the point is. I mark it out and then I join it up to the previous point. So I basically want to continue in this fashion, marking out the key points on the original drawing where the line of the drawing deviates or changes direction. And once I've marked out all of these key points, I basically just join them together like a fancy join the dot puzzle. You'll also see I'm using the set square on the original drawing to simulate one of the edges of the bounding box. So I'll have a point from which to measure, which will correspond to the bounding box on the enlarged drawing. Okay, so that is the rough line drawing done. So now it pretty much looks like the drawing in the top part of the original. but I want it to look more like this drawing here. So what I'm going to do is just take a soft pencil and go over the lines I've drawn and just smooth them out a bit and add a few more curves. Okay, so that's all the lines smoothed out. So basically the final stage is to add in the shading. And to do that I'm going to use some Nitram charcoal sticks, HB and B. I've got my piece of sandpaper to sharpen the sticks, and also this little blender here. Now the shading on this particular drawing is relatively simple, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about how I draw with charcoals. I'm just basically going to say that for the lighter parts of the shade I'm going to be using the HB charcoal, and for the very dark parts the B charcoal sticks. What I'd also recommend, especially when using these Nitram charcoal sticks, is you keep them sharp nearly as much as possible. So to sharpen, you basically just rub the sticks on the sandpaper like I'm doing here. Okay, so that's the charcoal stick nice and sharpened. If you just take a look here, and if the camera decides to focus, hold on, yeah, there we go. So you want a very nice fine point to start drawing with. Okay, so let's finish this drawing. Okay, so that is a completed drawing. So you can see by the use of the proportional divider, the set square, and also the use of a bounding box and guidelines, you can pretty easily recreate and enlarge any drawing you want. So I hope you found this tutorial useful, and I'm also going to list all the tools and materials I used in the description. Plus, if you have any comments or questions, just leave them in the comment section and I'll get back to them. Alright, take care now. Bye.